Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Rewriting Crash Course. This is going to be about building the bedrock of your story based upon the principles that we looked at in the first video, which was awareness and organizing your story. Now, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one to actually fix your screenplay, click the top link in the description, and let's get right into the video here. So today, last time I organized the story. That's kind of where we left off, and this idea, right? The philosophical conflict. This was what I said was the most important part of your story. Why? This is the reason for your story's existence. This is where your theme comes from, and this is the reason that stories exist at all. Stories do not simply exist to be entertaining. They exist to show people trying to figure out what the best way to live is, essentially making hard choices, and those hard choices creating the theme, creating the meaning of the story. I also recommended you watch that Michael Arndt video. He goes into extreme depth in this concept in a way that would be very helpful for you. I will try to link that again in this description as well. So how do you actually build out a philosophical conflict, right? So your story is about something. Your story is about the theme, essentially, and how do you actually build that out, and what does that look like? So if we look at a story like Sicario, right? In this story, we have our character, we have Kate, and she is our protagonist, and Kate has a belief, right? So this is where this really comes in. So Kate has a belief. She believes that she is a police officer. I think she's an FBI agent, not a police officer. She's an FBI agent. She's trying to take down the cartel, and she's trying to do this legally and by the book. So Kate's belief is that essentially we should take down criminals by the book, right? So why is this important? So we should take down criminals by the book, right? So legally. Why? She believes this because she believes that if we are acting outside of the law, then we are no better than the criminals we are trying to take down. So this is the belief that she then holds in the story. So then what happens? Well, what happens is at the very beginning of the story, we watch her try to raid this house where it's owned by the cartel, and she believes that there are members of the cartel inside. She goes in, and they rip the walls down and realize there are dead bodies, dozens of them, in the walls. Not only that, but she comes outside, and the other agents are checking in the shed, and an explosion happens, killing some of the agents and injuring others, right? So essentially what we have set up here is how she is trying to take them down is by the book, yet their methods are so much more brutal and intense than she can handle, right? So then we enter into the story, and she is essentially challenged this belief. So then we have the Matt character that comes in. And then what Matt does is he believes that we should take down the cartel, or these, sort of bad people, by any means necessary, right? Because he believes that we need to fight these, intense criminal organizations with the same level of vigor and intensity that they fight us. And that means playing dirty. So these are the two competing beliefs in the story. These right here, okay? See how these are beliefs in conflict, right? Essentially, philosophical conflict means beliefs of characters in conflict, right? So what you are doing, right, when you are either building a story or you are trying to rewrite your story, let me clear all this out for you, is you are trying to set up two competing beliefs. That is philosophical conflict. Essentially, competing beliefs is another way to look at this. So you are going to have sort of viewpoint one in your story, or belief set one, whatever you want to call it, versus viewpoint two. Okay? So these are the beliefs in conflict in your story, right? Now, this is the foundation of your entire plot and the entire story that takes place. Remember how I'm talking about Sicario? The entire story is based upon what Kate believes and the actions she takes based upon her beliefs and the characters that compete with her or antagonize her, both characters like Matt and Alejandro and the cartel themselves, right? So this is what you have to build out essentially. And so in Sicario, it is, viewpoint one is, things need to be done by the book and legally, because if we do not do this, then we are just like the criminals. The other viewpoint is we need to essentially fight fire with fire. Okay? So, in your story, this is what you need to be looking at, right? If you're in a situation where you are not sure what your story is about, this is where you go, right? You're back in your rewrite, and this is what you're trying to understand from the beginning. What is this story actually about? And another thing is, it's very difficult to handle 5 of these in a story or 3 of these in a story, right? You have one philosophical conflict. Trying to handle any more than one is honestly going to leave you in a mess, especially if you are a new writer. And in regards to a film, you only have between 90 and 120 pages to actually tell the story that you're trying to tell. So you don't have the time to write 3 different philosophical conflicts and interweave all of that together. Don't try to do that. Focus on 2 viewpoints in conflict with each other. Okay, so the next step, right? So once you have the idea of viewpoint 1 versus viewpoint 2, then what you need to do is you need to build reasons on both sides. So essentially, this is the easiest way to think about this, okay? So you build pros and cons for each belief set, okay? So what do I mean by this? Well, if we come back to the Sicario example, the pros, think about the pros of following, going by the book, following legal structures. By doing this, you do show that you are handling things above criminals, right? You are handling things in a legal, moral, ethical way, and you are not having to stoop to the level of criminals and the things that they are doing to actually take them down, right? Now, the cons on the other side is what we see immediately in the story. Because Kate is trying to handle things by the book, the cartel is winning because they are ruthless. They are killers. They're doing all of this crazy stuff. They're storing bodies in houses. They're rigging the shed to blow up when the police come. It's a mess, right? So clearly there are huge cons, right? There are huge cons because essentially what she's doing is not working. On the other side, the pros of Matt's belief is that you have way more tools at your disposal when you're trying to get down and dirty and actually meet these criminals on their level to take them down, right? You have so much more at your disposal. The cons are that legally, morally, and ethically, you are in muddy water, right? You are stooping down to the level of criminals to beat them. And essentially it begs the question, does the ends actually justify the means here? If you stoop to their level to take them down, are you no better than them? 1, and 2, does this actually hold up in the long term in the sense of legal structures? Not only the moral and ethical question, but you also do actually have that legal question. If they take them down this way, it may come out later and they, the cartel members that they capture may end up getting released. And this is the pros and cons of, Sicario and the beliefs that they have. So does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, right? Because it's not just having a viewpoint 1 and a viewpoint 2. You need to build the gray dilemma, right? This is what so many writers struggle with. They have some sort of sense of what their story is about. It's about justice or it's about, whatever. But the problem is they don't ever actually make it really gray. They don't make it a dilemma. They just make it black and white. Clearly the protagonist is right. Clearly the antagonist is wrong. And then we go through the motions of the story. And that is why you feel that stories are formulaic, not because of structure, not because they followed, the Save the Cat structure or Dan Harmon story circle, any of that. It's this right here. It is because they did not actually build a gray dilemma. They wrote a black and white story that did not engage you. It didn't make you think, and it didn't build empathy for the characters, because the way that you build empathy for the characters is actually understanding their point of view and understanding their belief. You don't even necessarily need to agree with them, but if you understand their point of view, then you can be on their side. You can at least be interested in what they are going to do next. So you need the gray dilemma. You need the audience wondering. You hear a lot about make the audience turn the page, make them wonder what's going to happen next. They don't wonder what's going to happen next if you have a black and white story. They do wonder what's going to happen next if your story is gray, where the end is not clear or the right choice to make by your characters are not clear. That's what engages the audience, because they want to know what is going to happen next. How are these characters going to make the decision based upon the worldview that they have? Okay? So this is why hopefully you get a little bit of a better sense of why this is important and why this is the most important part of your story. Another thing I will say is, if you can nail this right here, if you can nail your philosophical conflict, you can nail your viewpoint 1 and your viewpoint 2, this will set you up for success more than anything else in your story, more than super closely adhering to structural rules, more than, being super intense on your dialogue, any of that, right? This is the foundation of your story. And so you can get some of the other pieces wrong or not quite there, but if you have this, your story can still be engaging and be interesting. Now, let me explain, I've worked with a lot of different writers one-on-one, and I talk to a lot of writers inside the practical screenwriting course. And one of the things I see all of the time is that writers forget to go intense on these things right here. And what I mean is, they forget to actually be serious about what the cons are of the different beliefs in their story. So for example, let's say the protagonist of their story believes viewpoint 1, right? So then what happens is they say, okay, well, the pros of their viewpoint is this, and maybe there's a con or maybe there's a con. No, what you need to do is you need to say, okay, what is the worst case scenario for my protagonist? Right? They hold it, or what is the worst case scenario for someone holding this viewpoint? How do I build in the worst case scenario for the characters in this story to deal with? That's what you have to do, because that's what your story is about. Your story is about actually pushing to the real dilemma, and that is what engages your audience. When you actually push your characters to their limits, the audience doesn't know what's going to happen next. They don't know what the right choice is for your character, and then they are engaged. Okay? So I know I'm giving you a lot of information here, but this is the focus. And same on the viewpoint 2. Let's say this is your antagonist, right? One of the big things I see on the other side is people do not beef up the pros of the antagonist view. Look at a story like The Dark Knight, okay? It's very obviously very popular film. It's very likely that you have seen it. One of the reasons that we like the Joker, or we're interested in his character, it's not just because he makes jokes. It's not because he's a comic book villain that we are aware of. What it is because is that story actually beefs up and enhances and makes real Joker's point of view. So what is Joker's point of view in the story, right? In the story, essentially, and if you watch the interrogation scene of The Dark Knight, that will show you exactly the philosophical conflict of that story. So within that story, Batman believes that the rule of law is valuable and important, and it is what society is built upon. And because of that, he has one rule. He is willing to get down in the dirt with the criminals, but he has one rule: he does not kill. On the other side, Joker believes that everything we see here, culture, the rules that we've set up, the judicial system, the legal system, he believes it's all a facade. And the only way to live in this world is without rules. And what he does to Batman and what he does to Harvey Dent is he pushes on their beliefs, and he pushes them and he pushes them. And with Harvey Dent, he wins. He brings Harvey down to his level. He makes Harvey believe that the world we see, it's a facade. things don't go your way, and he makes Harvey Dent a criminal, and he proves his belief system essentially through Harvey Dent. And so that's why the film is working so well, because the writers, Nolan, and I believe he had a co-writer, I can't remember, actually beefed up the pros of the antagonist's belief. So what people usually do is they focus on the pros of the protagonist's belief and the cons of the antagonist's belief, and this is how you get a black and white story that is boring and no one cares about. They need to be beefed up, of course, they need to be good, but the way that you really build that gray dilemma is thinking about, why does my antagonist believe what he believes? What are the drawbacks of the beliefs of my protagonist? That is where you build the real dilemma of your story. One of the things that Robert McKee said was that your story is a lot about making a choice between the lesser of two evils than it is a black and white story. What he's essentially trying to say there is your story has a philosophical conflict and it is viewpoints that are clashing, and you have to actually build a real dilemma. So now let's go to, how does this all sort of fit into your story as a whole, and kind of how you are building it? Well, if your story has some sort of stated theme, right? If you are building a story with a theme, which is, in my view, the best way to build a story. Again, not that you can't make stories that are roller coaster rides or simply surprising or just entertaining, but that's not what I'm focusing on right here. So you are going to have a stated theme, essentially, right? So your theme for the story, what you are trying to say, this is going to be the end result of the conflict between these two viewpoints, right? So in the end of your story is saying what, right? So it's saying, sometimes we have to, get down in the dirt with criminals to beat them. Maybe your story is saying, no matter what, we need to uphold the legal system and uphold the legal structure, because that is the only way we can separate ourselves from the villains, right? Okay, that's the stated theme. So essentially, it's just at some point you are going to get to the end. And what will usually happen in a good story is that it is not like clearly viewpoint 1 or clearly viewpoint 2. You make some sort of like gray, realistic end theme in some way. Not necessarily. You can make a story that's, viewpoint 1 or viewpoint 2. For example, Shawshank Redemption is about hope. Andy Dufresne believes that we must be hopeful in any situation in life, and we must maintain that hope because it keeps us alive. And the story's theme confirms his viewpoint at the end of the story. So sometimes it depends on essentially what you want. But sometimes you're going to write a story that is more difficult or grayer in the dilemma, and you will end up with some sort of, grayer theme where we're saying, hey, even though these things happen, we must believe this or this, that sort of idea. Hopefully that makes sense here. So that's really philosophical conflict. That's the whole thing. So when you are looking at your story, when you're trying to rewrite, here's some questions you need to ask your story. So first, what are the two viewpoints in conflict in your story, right? You're going to read through your screenplay and you're going to say, okay, do I actually have any sort of theme at all? What's likely is you don't. Or what's likely is you have, little bits and pieces that you're trying to like throw in, but really you have a plot and a structure, and that's what you're focused on. So the biggest thing to do is figure out, okay, what are the two viewpoints in conflict in my story? And then what are the best and worst things that could happen on both sides? Those are some of the scenes that you're going to build. And what are the pros and cons of the beliefs of viewpoint 1 and of viewpoint 2? Those pros and cons then become some of the best and worst things that could happen to your characters or to challenge that particular belief. And then you take that and that becomes some of the elements of your plot. So hopefully that makes sense. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to take this and clearly incorporate it into characters and build a character web and see whether or not your characters are working and whether or not they should be in your story. And if you'd like to work with me one-on-one to rewrite your screenplay, figure out what's not working with it, fix those problems, and make a better story, then click the top link in the description and we can talk about it. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.